In this video, we're going to go over cotán. So cotán follows the rule of 4, just like our other functions with the exception of tan. The rule of 4 is on the right-hand side. So what you need to know is that the period for tan and cotán is pi. So that means that when you look at your graph, or you look at your function rather, your period will equal pi over whatever b is. If there's no b there, then your period is just pi. So here's your pi, your ending angle. Here's your pi over 4, following the rule of 4. This is 2 pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. And then you have your 1 and your negative 1. Remember, for cotán, the asymptotes are on the 0 and on the pi, and your graph is living and dancing this way. So when the angle is pi over 4, the value for cotán, and tan for that matter, is 1. When the angle is pi over 2, or 2 pi over 4, the value is 0. And when the angle is 3 pi over 4, the value is negative 1. So there you have it. That's your graph. So with that in mind, what I'd like you to do now is see if you can graph the following. What would you get if I gave you y equals negative cotán x? So stop the video and see if you can get a graph for that. Alright, so this is what you should have for y equals negative cotán of x. Your angles have not changed, your y values have not changed, but every single y value has been multiplied by negative 1. So that means that if your y value was 1, as it is up here, it is now negative 1. When it's 0, and I kind of missed it here, didn't I? When it's 0, 1 or negative 1 times 0 is still 0. That does not change. When your y value was negative 1, multiplied by negative 1, it's now positive 1. So you have just flipped or reflected vertically your original function over the x-axis. So that should be pretty straightforward. All right, next page we're going to do 3 cotán x. Okay, we'll do this together. The 3 is your a. It's not really an amplitude for cotán and tan. It's just a stretch. So your y-axis has been adjusted to reflect the a of 3. Your angles have not changed. You still end with pi. Your asymptotes have not changed. They're still here and here. And now when you graph your cotán, instead of having the 1, you now have a 3, because you've taken every y value and multiplied it by 3. The 0 remains a 0, and the negative 3 was a negative 1. Negative 1 times 3 gives you negative 3. There's your cotán graph. Try to do this on your own and reason it through. Our next graph is y equals cotán 2x. So you should notice that the amplitude has not changed, but I wrote period equals 2 pi over b, which is incorrect, isn't it? It should say period equals pi over b. Let me just see if I can erase that. So I will work on erasing that. In the meantime, why don't you go ahead and try to graph your problem. Alright, what you should have done is realize that if the period is normally pi and b is now 2, the period is pi over 2. That's the only thing that's changed. You still have your values of 1 and negative 1 on your y-axis, and your graph, when you sketch it out, should look like this. And I like to put my asymptotes on so that I can see where I'm not allowing my graph to go. Alright, that's y equals cotán 2x. And remember, period is just pi over b. Okay, let's go on. We're going to try to do a combined period shift and a shift on the next page. Okay, here's your initial setup. I see that my a is 6, and I know that period equals pi over b, and I notice that my b is 5. Okay, so stop the video now and go ahead and try to sketch it given that information. Okay, I hope your graph looks like mine. So you can see that I have changed my angles. My last angle is the period because I'm starting at 0, so it's pi over 5. Divide that by 4, which is like multiplying by 1 over 4, and you get pi over 20. I didn't fill in the other angles. I'm sure you could do that, and you can see that my graph for Cotán looks the way it normally does, only it's now stretched. Okay, and it is taking pi over 5 to go, so 1/5 the pi, so it's vertically stretched and horizontally compressed. So that's what's going on there. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to draw a graph, and you are going to identify it. Okay, here's the graph. You know it's a Cotán because we're working on Cotáns, but would you know that if you didn't know it was a Cotán? So think of how it's shaped. What points should you look for? I should put another angle in here for you. So let's make this pi over 16. And I want you to notice this point right here. So this is pi over 16, comma 3. That should give you some help because you should be able to recognize your A there. Your B should be helped by that angle. So think about it again with this information and see if you can come up with what the equation of the graph is going to be. Alright, when you finish, you should have gotten that y is 3, because of this, cotangent 4x. Because remember, your period is normally pi, and it's pi over b, and if I observe that my period is pi over 4, then that b must have equaled 4, and here is where it goes. Okay, so hopefully that helped you understand Cotán. So look it over, make sure that you can master this material.